a massive fan of the Egyptian school of oud playing, essentially. Well, I would be. I mean, it's a bit of biased, I suppose. My name is Tariq Bashir. I am of Egyptian, Nubian, and Sudanese origins. I am a oud player and singer with the band Oxford Maqam. I particularly enjoy playing Egyptian music of the last quarter of the 19th century all the way up to perhaps the mid 20th century. Oxford Maqam, like a lot of, I suppose, good things, started with a pure coincidence. I have lived in Oxford since 2004. By pure coincidence, I was walking past a restaurant. This guy saw me with an oud on my back, stopped me, had a chat with me, and then told me that there's a qanun player in Oxford. The qanun is one of those instruments that are just really rare to find people that play it. So I immediately thought, wow, I mean, I'd never thought I'd find a qanun player in my town. Maybe another oud player or a violinist or something, but qanun is really quite rare. So of course I was just jumped at the possibility of meeting this person. Then lo and behold, when I do meet him, he's a white guy, an English white man. And I'm thinking, this is even more surreal now. And of course, that man was Martin Stokes, Dr. Martin Stokes.
I think we all remember our first meeting, our first meetings, because there were so many, and a lot of us are involved in this. I think we all remember it. We all remember it very differently. I think it was somebody else who saw Tariq getting onto a bus with an oud and said, "What's that?" Said, "That's an oud you're carrying, isn't it?" And I think that person, who was Gökhan Yücel, actually a Turkish friend of ours who used to perform with us back in the very, very early days, I think it was he who brought Tariq I mean, I grandly call it a group or an ensemble. I mean, it really just wasn't that at all. It was just a tiny handful of people who had got a rather vague interest in this kind of music. My name is Martin Stokes. I'm Professor of Music here at King's College, London. I also play qanun, which is the Arabic plucked zither, with Oxford Maqam, and have been doing since we started. I became interested in Egyptian music through my interest in Turkish music. And around about the 1930s, the 1940s and the 1950s, Arabic language Egyptian film was very popular in Turkey. And the popularity of Egyptian musical film was rather significant in Turkey. It produced a kind of reaction because the state was very anxious about Arabic influence in the new national culture. And then that reaction in turn produced a reaction. It was a reaction against the reaction. So this was the beginning, around about the year 2000, of me beginning to try to learn Egyptian Arabic and to immerse myself in Cairo's amazing musical culture and films. And I worked with various people, but eventually started working with a guy called Asa Boulos. We got a really good ensemble going, and at some point I thought, we need a qanun. The qanun doesn't get played much because the keyboard has taken over. It's a fiddly instrument. It's always going out of tune. Keyboards are kind of easier to deal with. So the qanun was dying a bit of a death, I would say, in the 1990s. I would go so far as to say that. And I think there was nobody who played the qanun in Chicago, which is where I was. So I made myself useful. I taught myself Arabic qanun, very faulty technique. When I came back to England, I had some lessons from Maya Youssef, who was a very great qanun player based here in the UK, a Syrian player, and she really gave me a lot of help with the technique. Switch from the hard plectrums to the soft plectrums, because I think that gives us a sound that's more authentic to the 1930s and 1940s and 1950s. It's an accompaniment instrument. And so here I am. When I started doing this, there were very, very, very few people outside the Arab world. In Turkey, we played the qanun. And even within the Arab world, not Turkey, Turkey's different in this regard, but in the Arab world, the qanun was fighting a losing battle against the keyboard. So I started off simply just trying to fill a little bit of a gap in the soundscape, and here I am now, kind of stuck with it.
I think it was Martin that came up with let's go Oxford Maqam. And that was essentially just so we know that a name like that will have a good domain. We'll find a domain that we can buy and can have a website. It'll be a unique name to us. There's nobody else would be called Oxford and Maqam in the same breath and stuff.
And at some point, I think we were kind of messing around, but figuring out that we could make things happen and that people were interested. And at some point, somebody said, "What's the name of your band?" And we were like, well, we didn't even realize we'd got a band, let alone got a name for it. And so it kind of stuck.
In music, it always ever means one thing when you refer to the word maqam in a musical context, and that is the modal system on which all of the music from Morocco to Azerbaijan are based upon. It's the science and the language of communication of music over the last 7 or 8 centuries. And it's true to what we do because, again, as far as the ensemble is concerned, everything we do is maqam based. It's a very organic thing where you've got someone like Martin and Ahmed with their vast knowledge of Ottoman music, for example. Yara came to us where she had a real knack for singing 1950s and 60s contemporary Lebanese songs especially, and of course the Palestinian songs of resistance and before. So many different backgrounds and stuff. But one thing we all did decide consciously is that we should find our own niche.
I just joined in a workshop, that was it, with Martin and the rest of the band, who had invited Isa Boulos over from America to do a workshop on an Kulthum song called Inta Umri, and it was the first time that I actually have a kind of formal performance, and it was a sort of baptism of fire. My name's Yara Salahuddin. I'm a ethnomusicologist. I'm completing a PhD on the subject of the history of Egyptian music at the turn of the 20th century. And I'm a singer in Oxford Maqam ensemble, and I've been singing in it for over 15 years now. That tarab, that improvisation, the sound is very well represented through the voice of Kulthum, because she was maintaining an interest in that performance style and in songs that compositionally afforded her that space and improvisation and that sound within her slightly enlarged ensemble throughout her career. So for people for the last century growing up listening to like classical Arab music, as if we want to call it that, to use not a great term, but just for ease, Kulthum represents that kind of older nostalgia, authenticity, kind of. These are kind of bywords that people use to describe her. But she, of course, at the same time, she was, as you can imagine, producing music at the same time as Abdel Halim. She wasn't acting alone, and in fact, what those terms of nostalgia and authentic and lose is the fact that what you miss is that the fact that she was a massively pioneering person. She was very ruthless in terms of how she crafted her sound, and she didn't want to sort of stay in one area. She just kept shifting her composers, shifting the instrumentations that she worked with, shifting the types of lyrics that she used, and so that's perhaps one of the reasons that she stayed relevant for so long. So as a singer, Kulthum is someone you're unavoidable. You grow up listening to her and you learn a great deal about voice and power and control and enunciation. But then you also absorb by accident all these notions of what Arabic music should be and was. And so as a researcher and really my research began in the band before it began in my career, in my professional career. So a very long time ago. What you learn in the band when you work on repertories from the turn of the century and tarab as a concept, as a musical concept that you're exploring, is how much Kulthum was in fact adapting existing old practices. There is no such thing as one tarab or one authentic Arabic sound or one authentic Arabic takht. Or there are principles that are and conventions that remain and last, and that's true, and they're identifiable. But there are also when you kind of hone in any one moment, there's a great deal of flourishing and dynamism and change and that's happening. So that's why I'm interested in. This is why I research this period. The last couple of hundred years are always shifting, and it's an exciting period musically to study. Doing this, for a few years now has just generated so many questions that I'm glad to now be able to sit and explore. It's really just scratching the surface. The Egyptian soundtrack, as a history, is extremely complex and rich and redefines for us in many ways what a global or world music can be. So the average audience of an Egyptian film is listening to quite a cosmopolitan sound, but that has grown and adapted and responded to other world trends. And the sound and the scores of Egyptian films often are very identifiable by the audiences and very beloved. And there is even TV shows that recreate them in the same way that you might go to the opera house here and kind of get a live rendition of Star Wars or something. There is a lot of love for the sound world of Egyptian cinema in the public in the Arab world. So I'm really excited to kind of think about all the questions that come out of listening to Egyptian film in general.
We want to dive into all the interesting eras in Egyptian music. It's had such a changeable and really tangible musical journey, Egyptian music, striving for authenticity, not replicating things, but grounding the authenticity as something first, the ideas behind something, the ethos behind all of these works, and then having enough creative people around to be able to add their own kind of thing onto it. We're not looking, as you've experienced with us, we want to stay totally and utterly respectful to a lot of these songs that we play together in the big band, but absolutely no problem at all when there is a brass segment or something written to as something a little bit different to what was going on before. I think there's one or two songs that actually don't sound like the original almost at all, but still respectful to the genres. Like, we get what you're trying to do. We're going to do something a little different with it, and that's kind of just keeps it fresh, keeps us interested as musicians. There's so many of these talented young musicians around, and I always think that it's the air we breathe as musicians.
then when I moved to Oxford to do my master's and my PhD, Tarek was living in Oxford at the time, so I actually started playing in. I kind of stayed in touch with him. He would teach me. We'd play a bit together, and I started playing with another band that he was in called Brickwork Lizards, which does a little bit of kind of Arabic stuff as well. But then really I was spending a lot of time in Cairo, kind of going back and forth. I'm Sophie Frankfurt. I'm currently doing a postdoc at King's in the music department as part of this project called Beyond 1932, which is about the kind of ongoing echoes of this. It was the Arab Music Congress that was held in Cairo in 1932. My involvement in the first iteration of this big band project was really tied up with, the beginning of my interest in Egyptian music. I was doing my undergrad degree at King's in the music department, and I can't remember. I think I decided to write my dissertation on something about Egyptian music. So I was kind of chatting to Martin about what I might work on. He was my supervisor at the time. And he told me about this idea he had to have the Arabic ensemble, the Takht, Oxford Maqam, with a big band and a string section. So I play violin. I also used to play saxophone, so I was playing in the King's big band, the King's jazz band at the time. So I think that was how this whole thing started in 2013. We kind of got my string quartet, so it was just a quartet at the time. It wasn't a full string section, and some people from the jazz band, including Dan Woodfield. So yeah, it was kind of on a much smaller scale, but for me that was the first time I'd played Egyptian music and really listened to it, and just kind of doing those rehearsals, getting to know Tarek and Yara and everybody in the band was, I think, really the beginning of something for me. I just started to listen more and more, and I guess 11 years later, I'm still really enjoying it, and it kind of went from there. So it's really exciting to see how it's kind of expanded and become this whole, massive brass section, a full string section, and percussion and everything. I think the difference between that first kind of attempt and this now is really exciting to see where it's gone. So I started going to Egypt. I think the first time I went was in 2014 or 2015. I decided to do a master's in Middle Eastern Studies because I wanted to kind of keep studying Arabic music, Egyptian music. So I first went to Egypt to do Arabic language study, and Ahmed Salhi, who was playing violin with Oxford Maqam, he lives in Kuwait, I think now. I asked him if he knew anybody in Cairo to have violin lessons with. So he gave me the number of a violinist called Abdel Halim, who is very well known. He passed away a few years ago. But he's well known on the music scene in Egypt. So I got in touch with him. At first, I didn't really speak Arabic, so I had to get my Arabic teacher to help call him and arrange the lessons, and he said, come to my house. So I went to his house, and we kind of managed to get through the language barrier. So I started taking a few lessons with him, and it was a very different way of learning. Even the kind of idea of taking lessons is not that familiar to the kind of style of learning there. Abdel Halim, he taught some foreigners before, some Japanese people and European people, American people. So he was quite used to kind of this idea that I would call him and then come sit with him for an hour, and he'd teach me some specific things. I'd go away, practice them, and come back. But it's kind of more standard that you would just sit with people for a long time and kind of learn little bits here and there, and it's all done by ear. So this is kind of how he would teach me, right? He would play a little phrase and I would play it back, and he'd say, no, the tuning of that microtone is not quite right, try it again. But not with words. He would just kind of play like, this is how we would communicate at the beginning. And then gradually I learned Arabic, and I kind of kept going back to Egypt, and then I lived there for a couple of years to do fieldwork. Coming back to doing this has made me reflect in a way that I'd kind of forgotten about how doing this original Oxford Maqam little collaboration was really influential in the, kind of my decision to want to know more about this musical style, and it's become such a big part of my life, and I'd kind of forgotten that it was really rooted in that first experience of playing with these guys. So yeah, it's quite a special thing, and I think that's that was making me reflect actually on it feels so different because now I have a better understanding of both sides. I think the musicians in the string section and big band, or especially the string section. I guess we're more used to having notation, reading what's there. Whereas maybe I don't know, the jazz musicians are more used to kind of using that as like a head sheet and going somewhere else with it. And like the tacht who aren't reading notation, they're doing it all from ear, and trying to kind of bring those styles together, like rehearsal styles even. I remember finding that very challenging, back in 2013. Because, Tariq, for example, knows the sound he wants. But then the string section saying, but what bar is that? That kind of thing can be a challenge to kind of get the mutual language. But I think it, helps doing these concerts again and again, working together over a long period of time. Makes it work.
There was a point when we were transcribing it where the notes changed on the repeat, but we just couldn't quite figure out where or what or who. So
I think let's move up. When transcribing, it's just keep the harmony right.
it is odd when you're hearing it, such a clear horn noise. You're like, this is not functioning. There it is. You got it. Cool. So let's hear all of that line with everybody playing a major scale and a major chord for the last two bars before L. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Hey! It sets it up nicely. Are we running it again?
When we play these songs, I'm sure the audience, as soon as they hear the first note, they're going to know what song it is. So people recognize it right from the very beginning, which makes it exciting to play. And I think, these songs are really well known. They're performed a lot today by all different kinds of ensembles in Egypt. You'll hear them performed in the kind of taht, small ensemble, in the opera house, or this kind of, more formal sit-down venue. They're performed in very casual, intimate settings, just a few friends sitting and jamming together. Even a few of the more well-known ones might be performed at these kind of big street weddings, like a very raucous, because they're so famous. So I think they're performed in all these kind of different iterations with these very different sounds, but they're not really performed in this setup like we're doing it with the big band and the string section. So it's quite exciting to hear them in that iteration.
A little bit,
Yeah.
So it's not.
Yeah, there was those pushes, weren't there?
So it's not so much.
Yeah.
I think the next idea was to focus on big band stuff, because we began, I think the three of us, Yara and Tariq and I, and Dan, who was with us really very much from the outset with this, were beginning to see kind of what was, what could be done here. So we started figuring out what big band numbers we thought would work. Long story short, for several years, really, we were working away on the transcription. We basically got the skeleton of the set that we're working with now around about 2019, I want to say. Where we are today is picking ourselves up after the pandemic. I don't know whose idea it was, but we'd done all of this work, and I think it started off with someone just saying, we'll put all of that work into that. Wouldn't it be a pity if it just came to nothing? So this was the beginning of the plan to booked the Greenwood Theatre. At this point, Jake had come on board, and Jake is a phenomenal organizer, has a phenomenal energy, and just brings with him this wonderful group of musicians. He got very excited by the idea, and I think it was Jake coming on board really that just pushed this thing over the line. So here we are. We gave it a trial shot last year, not knowing at all how it was going to go and how it was going to be received. As you know, the theatre was pretty much packed. We got a very, very, very warm response, and our immediate thought was, let's do it again.
I was even doubly ecstatic the other day when we all met last Sunday. It was because it's the same group as last year. And it meant a lot that a lot of the people from last year came back to do this again, because it means that they've enjoyed it, they loved it, they like the experience, they want more of it again, the same as us. I can actually see sometimes I'm people watching a little bit, and I can see some people looking at their dots, but with a smile on their face, as like, oh, this is nice, this, and that's what makes me happy ultimately. I feel like, okay, so we're all pulling in that same direction. We're all doing this out of complete and utter love. Playing oud behind with a large ensemble and playing behind singing and stuff is its own art form, in my opinion. You know, once there's a singing and there's instruments, you know, find your space within that, find where the oud frequency sits within all of that, so you can play it without kind of being overbearing or being completely unheard, but being something that creates this melodic, percussive element to it.
أسأل عليه وأقول يا عين حشوفه فين وأتهنى بيه ويملؤ نسيت مرار الانتظار.
One of the most fascinating areas is the percussion. For example, we just did a piece where there was a very Arabic rhythm in the singing, but there was no Arabic rhythm in percussion playing. And I've never done that before. I've always had the support of the rik, the tambourine, providing the Arabic rhythm underneath, and it was really satisfying to reproduce what these guys thought of in the 50s, which is like, okay, you know, we can keep some other beat going, like rumba, or I don't know what it is, and we can do Arabic stuff on top of that and produce a certain mix that where you're hearing both. You know, I think it's quite balanced, and it's the balance that is really exciting. Somewhere in the middle.
Muhammad al-Qasabji spent a long time playing oud in the ensemble of the biggest star in the history of Egyptian music, Kulthum. And he played oud for her. He was one of her main composers for a long time. And then he almost retired into becoming the oud player in her ensemble.
Kulthum is the symbol, really, of the 20th century sound of tarab, if you like. Tarab being this aesthetic concept in Arabic music, meaning a condition or state of, often it's described as ecstasy, musical ecstasy, or extreme level of engagement with the music, such that there is an emotional state that you know results from it. And Kulthum, who lived a very long time, was born right at the start of the 20th century, grew up and just sort of like caught the end of a renaissance in a repertory that was steeped in tarab, which was, at the basis of it, is improvisation and interaction between musicians and voice in a very small ensemble, which is the takht. And that's what Oxford Maqam is. We are a takht, but we are a takht that kind of are interested in music of tarab and other musics as well from the Arabic world and Egypt specifically. So that's why we end up, the takht joins with a quartet and becomes something else, or joins the orchestra. So we have the tango band and we have the Oxford Maqam big band.
This project that we're doing, for example, it means so much. It's the music I grew up with. It's the music my parents grew up with. A lot of these songs played in our house when I was a youngster for so long. The tape would have been in my dad's car driving to work, and what have you, driving away for the weekend. It would be some of these songs that you're playing right now, and so it means a lot. And the fact that we are revisiting these numbers and really dissecting them, now getting inside them rather than just watching them from the outside, is in itself an absolutely gorgeous experience. I mean, you get to really dive into these songs and forensically kind of pull them apart and put them back together. It's fantastic. What's not to love?
In regards to how I was influenced by Abdel Halim, I mean, Abdel Halim is the consummate kind of performer, really. He's not only valued for the sound of his voice, but for the way that he could, the precision of control that he had, and how he used that for the purposes of expression. So he's a master of expression, and because he had quite a lengthy career, I learned a lot about different methods of expression, even when you're kind of producing different kind of genres or styles over the decades, and how to sort of have your own sound at the same time that kind of is constant and identifiable and true to you. And also how to experiment. So if we're talking specifically about Abdel Halim, he was someone who was always interested in trying out new things, I think even more than we realize, actually, because he died young. He was my favorite singer growing up. He's still my favorite singer.
I mean, he's a real figure of nostalgia. There's a statue of him in the Opera House. There's a very kind of lively fan culture surrounding him. You can actually visit his house, I think, where he lived. So people do a kind of pilgrimage to his house to see where he lived. People, on the anniversary of his death, I think, people gather at his burial place. So he means a lot to people. And you hear his songs around, the streets and in cafes. So he's a very present figure in kind of everyday life, as well as more focused music scenes.
It was absolutely amazing, heartwarming, and fabulous to hear an amazing band like yours playing Egyptian music in London. What a mix. My name is Usama Ghanem. I'm an Egyptian. I grew up in Cairo, Egypt, Muqattam specifically. And like both of my parents, my entire life, they listened to people like Kulthum, Abdel Halim, and all those people. So that's a bit of my background, sort of. I study international relations. I met Sophie here in the stairs of the campus, and she was like, "By the way, we're playing Egyptian music upstairs. Do you want to come and listen to theirs?" I was like, "Oh, Egyptian! Oh my God, this is perfect. Okay, let's go." And I brought like 5-6 of my friends. And to be fair, I was expecting maybe an old classical music. I don't know. I didn't expect it to be like songs that I actually know. One of my favorite songs ever, to a singer called Abdel Halim, and it's Ahwak. So I went there with everyone, and they played firstly Bukra wa Ba'du, and then they played Ahwak, and most of us were in tears. And meanwhile, I filmed a video of Ahwak when you guys were playing it, and it was so emotional for me to see that our culture has traveled that far. So I sent it to my family group chat with the same sort of message, and they were like, wow, those like they knew about our music, and they also like they zoomed into the faces of the people to make sure that there's no Egyptian, that's not Egyptian people who's playing the music today. Yeah, they know it, but it's actually people who are not Egyptian, not even Middle Eastern, not even Arabs, who are playing that. And they were so shocked at the fact that the Egyptian songs and the Egyptian culture and the art traveled that far, which, I don't know, makes you think of how powerful art is.
I think for people who grow up, or whose parents grew up with this music, and perhaps even whose grandparents grew up with this music, there's nostalgia, and there's kind of inherited nostalgia as well. Obviously it's an Egyptian thing to a large extent, but it's something that has spread across the entire Arabic-speaking world. So as you say, some of these are very iconic numbers, so people only need to hear the first few notes, and already there's a ripple of emotion around the room. It's the key to a whole world, really, and a whole world of emotions and a whole world of memories in the Arab world. It'd be nice to feel that we're making a contribution to that too.
What this big band gig is a huge dose of nostalgia. Ahwak is like the pop song of 1957. I mean, that song caught fire. And I'll tell you something about that piano. That's almost like anybody, 90% of any Arab person who wants to try his hand on a keyboard, that's the tune that they try and play. Because it follows that logic of like 1 2 1 2 2 2 2 1. It's like, you know, going up a ladder sort of thing, or down a ladder. You know what I mean? And it's got that kind of evenness to it. So that song in particular is a really, really, really big. It was a big hit in its time, and so well known. But nobody gets it in that format. So to play it like it's how the original started is what drew all these breaths and all these kind of, what you heard in that room is a collective sigh of pure nostalgia, and they just got punched in the stomach with a big dose of nostalgia. Just those first few notes. And we did warn you guys about that. We did warn you that we're doing this so well, it's starting to actually sound a lot like the original, and the people are going to be beside themselves when they hear it. And that's what's happened. It's like, so a lot of this stuff doesn't really get played a lot. Certainly not in the UK. You might get it in the opera house in Egypt or something, where they'll play this with an orchestra, and they'll give it the treatment and everything. But as far as the UK and Europe is concerned, you just simply do not get this treatment of these tunes at all anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to thank you for, helping to recreate the sound of the music that I grew up with and love dearly, and which definitely contributed to the profession that I chose, and my interest in Arabic music and Egyptian music specifically. It's really a privilege to be able to reproduce it in this orchestra with you all.
Yeah, well, thank you for being so enthusiastic about it, and being so open-hearted and open-eared about the whole thing. Really, this whole interview is the other way around. I'm just so curious about your experience of this and how it struck your ears. Obviously, we've spent years getting used to it, but for you, this is a new kind of encounter. But from the outset, we've wanted to think of ourselves as a kind of teaching and sharing project, to the extent that we're learning ourselves as we go along as well. And every step of the way, the more people we can carry along with us, the happier we are. So the the energy and the effort and the skill and the thoughtfulness you guys have put into it has been really humbling. Actually, it's been really fantastic.
I'll talk about this one after, but let's just sing it. You'll know it. You'll know it. This one. Every time. Every time. أتمنى لو أنساك وأنسى روحي وياك وإن ضاعت يبقى فداك لو تنساني وأنساك وتريني بنسى جفاك وأشتاق لعذابي معاك وألقى دموعي فكراك أرجع تاني في لقاك الدنيا تجيني معاك.
In terms of even understanding each other's views, I think Mahmoud Darwish, a Palestinian poet, have always had this quote that if you let conflicts and killings get between you, it's never gonna bring you sort of understanding. But arts and music, it's what brings people to understand each other in a different way.
واتمنى لو انساك وانسى روحي وياك وان ضاعت يبقى فداك لو تنساني وانساك وتريني منسى جفاك واشتاق لعذابي معاك ولا دموعي فكراك ارجع تاني في لقاك الدنيا تجيني معاك ورضاها يبقى رضاك وساعتها يهون في هواك طول حرماني. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that beautiful applause, for coming out tonight. You've been a really, really lovely audience, and we've missed you. Please show your appreciation once again for this amazing orchestra, the Oxford Maqam Big Band. Baya Bousla, Amira Karai. We'd also like to thank the staff of Greenwood Theatre, the bar, the lights, James and Simon, sound crew. Thank you, John and Tom. We'd also like to thank the incredible Daniel Woodfield for his dance moves that bring this music to life. Jake Fletcher, who not only worked on the transcriptions with Dan and our Ustaz Martin Stokes here, but he also brought this wonderful orchestra of musicians together. Thank you, Jake. And last but by no means least, we thank Mez Dubois van Slageren for her tireless work managing this whole event. We're so, so grateful, Mez. I don't know where you are. If you are here, please come on. Oh, there she is. Thank you very much.
It's just that we've got to, finish up and, get before it's, closing time, if you know what I mean.